Story 1. What the fuck attacked my car while driving? This isn't a joke, and I'm telling to you all to help me sort this out. I have no idea if what happened to me was real or not. I don't believe in weird-ass mumbo-jumbo, but I know I'm not crazy. So, I'm left with little other explanations. But judging from how much I'm shaking while typing this, it probably happened. Or at least I thought it did. I drive a gray Nissan, leather interior, flecked with water spots and vacuumed once in its pathetic life. It's old. It's a hunk of scraps, but it gets me places. I used to be a Lyft driver on weekends. Now I'm not for obvious reasons you'll understand soon, and I also have a day job. I love bagels and beer and women. I enjoy loud music. I'm normal. I swear I'm fucking normal. Never done a mean thing to anybody, let alone to deserve this demonic shit in my life. Anyways, I live on the east side of the States. I don't want to tell you guys exactly where, in case he's, or it's, reading this, but whatever. I don't think it can use a computer. Hell, I wouldn't be shocked if it could though. This year it's a fucking bitch summer. The days are hot and bleary and I sweat all goddamn day. I do hard labor for a living, so I'm a pretty big and in shape guy despite my age. Tall, wiry hair, thick beard, the whole 9 yards. I'm a friendly guy, live on a small street at a house in a cul-de-sac and drink Red Bull to survive. I have no kids, no close family, a couple of good friends, and a dog named Rascal. Okay, with all of that in mind, it was last Friday that this freaky shit happened. I'd have written about it sooner, but I couldn't muster the courage to do so. I was driving down my work town's main street. I don't work in the small town I live in, took off to the freeway, then found myself along the empty back roads. The brushery is thicker out here, the trees more plenty, and the weeds are looming long structures attacking the other plants. These roads are basically shortcuts the locals like me know of. It was after work, so it was dark. Towering trees were giving way to heavy foliage as I tried to avoid incoming traffic to my small passerby town. The road is a two-way, so there's oncoming and incoming traffic with high beams and honking horns every couple of miles. There were seldom any cars, but it wasn't so late there were none, just an average amount dotting the strip along the trip home. I had a Metallica CD blasting through my speakers, keeping it old school to stay awake in the night. Despite the warmth, I remember fog picking up in the distance, clouding my high beams enough that seeing even 10 feet ahead was impossible. I like to tap my fingers on my steering wheel and keep a Dr. Pepper in my cup holder. I'm a windows up, heater on sort of guy. As I continued to drive, music blaring, the night grew gradually darker until it was almost pitch black. I was a bit off-put by this, but didn't think too much of it. Sometimes the nights were darker. Simple as that. Mother Nature and all that shit. I felt my headlights were doing next to nothing to guide me, and the back roads seemed longer than usual, but I also attributed this to a lack of sleep and a long, hot day on the job. I was able to calm myself. As soon as I began to see figures darting back and forth in the road did I truly reflect on the shitty atmosphere. I would wipe at my eyes, rubbing them with my fists interchangeably. Still, the shapes would play across my vision, but the running figures would disappear eventually. If I stared at one too long it would seemingly melt into the darkness of the night and weave into the surroundings. This scared me more than them just being there, where I could see them. Now they came from everywhere. I didn't see too many after clearing my head like that. Fog, a moonless sky, the frost slinking up my windows in a haze. I was uneasy to begin with, but found myself drawn to continue down the road despite its newly found unfamiliarity. Eventually, I pulled over to switch CDs and check my GPS just to make sure the road was correct and that I hadn't accidentally taken a wrong turn. My car's clock showed a normal time, but I still felt like I had been driving for hours. My phone checked out my location to be accurate. Everything was good and I was being paranoid. I needed a beer, a dark beer, and I needed it soon. With only the intention to hurrying home in mind, I shifted my car into gear to speed back into the night. That's when I heard the knocking. Knock, knock. It was faint, so faint it could have been a child's or a weary adult's or an inquisitive stranger's. My head whipped to my passenger window, only to see nothing there. My throat was dry and I reached for my Dr. Pepper with a quivering hand. I took a long gulp. I settled for a moment. Knock, knock. This time, there was no mistaking the sound. It was a fucking knock, and it was brutal, curious, and determined. In a rush of adrenaline, I kicked the car into gear and sped off into the night. For a minute, I felt safe and secure. My car was moving away from whatever was scaring me. I was protected in the moving vehicle, protected in metal. Heavy, thick, durable metal. I was safe. Until the knocking persisted. This time, it was coming from the back windshield. I glanced in my rearview mirror and found nothing exciting, let alone something or someone knocking. My heartbeat wouldn't calm and my hands slipped off the wheel several times as they grew increasingly clammy. I hadn't been this scared since I lived with my dad. I sped faster, cutting into the roads and fog, slicing right through and leaving my mark. The moving figures were back, but they were a trick of the light. It was all a trick of the light. I kicked up gravel along my way, praying silently to a god I didn't believe in as the knock grew louder, now behind me. It was on my back right passenger window. It was crawling, whatever the fuck it was, slipping towards me in whatever gawky way it was could. I felt bile rise in my throat and I kicked the car into gear again, thrusting as fast as I could into the evening. A car honked at me as I swerved to get a look into their windows, see if they were real. I was too scared to open the window, but the presence of another car on the road comforted me slightly. I knew I couldn't drive whatever was knocking on my car to my home or anyone else's. I had to shake it off before getting into my hometown. Knock, knock. I began to weave through the road. The car jolted over the double yellows bumps, alerting me and pausing the knocker. Hollowly, I continued this and looped my way through another neighborhood, hoping the creature would let go. I realized in a moment of panic it was coming closer to my door and that it was unlocked. I locked them in a flurry of fear, my heart in my throat, my eyes leaving the main road to look at my window. I felt somehow as if I had just almost dodged a bullet. My eyes darted between my windows and mirrors, searching for even the slightest thing to be out of place. My car door's window was fogged beyond sight. I couldn't see out of it. The dewy breath was pulsating as if someone were breathing the fog onto the glass. A scream got caught in my throat as my door's handle jiggled. The force of the impending intruder shook the car somewhat. In a last effort to dissuade the creature, I cut a corner close and tight, as fast as I could, the car tipping and my breath getting caught in my throat. Immediately, the knocking was beside me, harsh and rapid in succession. The door was tried again in an angry cacophony of slamming and jarring. A hand slammed against my window and I gagged in an effort to stay calm at the sight of the inhuman appendage. The hand was furred, large, scraping into the glass and streaking it with an inhuman strength. The glass chipped the nail markings. "Just let me in and I'll leave you be." The whisper came from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I could swear I could see the streetlights flicker and the shadows move towards me. They were closing in and I was going to die. In a final effort, I hit the gas fully one last time and rammed my car head-on into one of the light poles with my phone already dialing 911. The cops, they would find me or I'd be dead, and both were comforting final thoughts. When I awoke, I was in my local hospital connected to an 4 with my foot in a cast. Apparently, the accident appeared severe, but my condition was not. I hadn't even been asleep a full day. I was given my phone back by the doc and told my car had been totaled. 24 hours after that and I was discharged with the doc handing me the salvaged items from my car's wreck. I was given the normal things I kept in my trunk, water bottle, emergency kit, etc., but one item did stand out. It was lying beside the car, the doc had told me. "What is it?" I asked. "We're not sure. The team who gathered it said it appeared to be some sort of heirloom. They assumed it belonged to you. Or, I believed it was one of those anxiety stones, the smooth ones. It's not yours?" I staggered, the doc catching me by elbow and steadying me. A look of concern flashed through blue eyes, but I was chuckling at my stumble, reassuring the doc I was fine. I was fucking fine. I feigned recognition of the stone and convinced him to give it to me. Oh yeah, that. I had assured the doc further. He had smiled and abided. The stone was yellowed in color, tapering to a blunt point with some interesting markings on the back alongside a few scrapes to the rock's front where it bent like a concave bow. I smoothed my thumb over the carvings. Before writing this, I figured out what the rock actually was. It's a tooth, blunt for crushing and etched with what I'm assuming are curses. The designs seem to have purpose, aren't apparently random. Regardless, it's a fucking tooth, and I only know that because I googled some of the characteristics and that's what the internet suggested. I'm scared the fucking thing is going to come back and knock on the door to my home. That will be a lot worse than knocking on my moving car. I don't know what to do or what precautions to take. I'm fucking scared, and I'm not scared to admit it, that's for fucking sure. If it comes after me, guys, it's going to be pissed too, seeing as I'm sure the crash was what broke its fucking tooth. I'm writing this with a broken leg and a crappy laptop in a local cafe. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Research has left me at dead ends after the tooth discovery. I swear to God I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm not a bad person and I can't take that road again. I fucking can't. Story 2. My college crush came back and I'm scared. Your girlfriend's here, my brother and roommate called from across the house in an obnoxious tone. I didn't feel like getting up to see what he was talking about. I didn't have a girlfriend, my social anxiety wouldn't allow it. With an exasperated sigh, I got off the couch. What are you talking about? Who's at the... My brain froze. She was standing there. Her, Rachel. The girl. She had barely changed. She still had those big brown eyes that had pulled me in a decade ago. She was as beautiful as the last time I had seen her. Oh God. No. The memories came rushing back, the memories I had spent years repressing. I had all but convinced myself that night never happened. I had been a freshman in college, away from everyone I knew for the first time. Making friends wasn't easy, but I was far from a loner. Rachel and I had some class together. I don't remember what it was for. We were bored and swapped each other's Snapchat IDs. We talked occasionally over the next few weeks, commenting on each other's stories and stuff. Then kind of out of the blue she asked if I wanted to come over her place. Her and some friends were having a movie night. Heck yeah, I replied with a smiley emoji. Awesome. We plan on watching the entire LOTR trilogy, pull an all-nighter, but you know how that's probably gonna go, LOL. At the time I would have barely considered us friends, but if she wanted to explore things past that, I was totally cool with the idea. She was fun, kind, and really pretty. The night came and sure enough the living room floor in the house her and her friends were renting was covered in mattresses. She greeted me with a hug. It was nice. I think that was the first time we had had any sort of physical contact. After some introductions to the people already there, we settled down to watch the movie. It's funny what your brain locks onto. Shit went to hell right after the troll is killed. 3 guys and a girl abruptly stood and started walking backwards until they were each against opposing walls. Their eyes were blank, almost clouded over. Rachel was standing in the hallway. The white claw she was holding fell to the floor, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were wide. She glanced at me for just a moment. A few people kind of chuckled nervously. The room had a weird tension to it. Like we all knew something wasn't right, but we didn't know what to do about it. Each of the 4 took off their shirts. They threw them to the side, never blinking those awful eyes. Energy was surging through me. I needed to go. I needed out. The girl next to me screamed. I turned to see the chest of the guy standing nearest her bulging. His skin split up the center, revealing writhing mass inside him. Others began to scream and stand. All of the 4 who stood glassy-eyed now had gaping chest cavities. With a wet squelch, tentacle-like appendages burst out from them. My heart skipped a beat, leaving me gasping painfully for breath. The girl next to me was lifted from where she sat and pulled towards the nearest tentacle monster. I didn't help her. I didn't help anyone. Others tried running but were snatched up and entangled in those wet dark green arms. Unlike the others, I didn't run for the door. I scrambled up the stairs, pulling myself up with my hands as my feet tried to keep pace. I lost my fingernails, but I didn't care. I needed out. Rachel didn't move. She didn't so much as glance my way. I didn't have time to think about that. I reached the top of the stairs just as one of the creatures started up after me. I ran into the nearest bedroom and closed the door behind me. Running on pure adrenaline, I ripped open the window and climbed onto the roof. I stopped myself from jumping down. I was directly over the front door. I could see light spilling across the front yard. The door was open. Grabbing the gutter and praying it would hold, I pulled myself up above the window. I had just cleared the window when I heard the bedroom door shatter. I ran across the roof at a reckless speed. I didn't think, I just jumped. The house was on a hill. That fact might have been what saved me. I fell what was probably 30 feet, but landed on my ass on an incline. Rather than shattering my legs, I slid down the hill, until my foot caught something and sent me tumbling head first through the ferns and brambles. Once I caught my footing again, I ran to the bottom of the hill. I found a road and followed it. At some point I cried myself to sleep under a tree. I never went back. I didn't even pack my things. Somehow my car ended up back at my dorm. After searching it, I climbed in and drove 2 states back to my parents' house. I told them I flunked out and couldn't afford my dorm. They were pissed, but I didn't care. I should have gone to therapy, but I felt like that would have been like admitting it was real. I just couldn't do it. I buried the memories by self-medicating. I lived by leeching off others for years before I started getting my life back together. Before convincing myself that night had never happened. Dude, that was ridiculous. My brother's voice pulled me from my memories. My dream? I was back on the couch. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. Seriously, man, she's cute and all, but passing out because a girl talked to you? That's next level, bro. I sat up looking around. Where is she? I demanded. Chill, man, you probably freaked her out when you went all limp. Don't worry, not only did I catch you and drag your heavy ass to the couch, I got a note from her. I ripped the paper from his hand. She took off pretty quick. She looked spooked. Anyways, I have to get going. Someone needs to pay the bills around here. I ignored him. My entire focus was riveted to the handwritten note. I'm sorry to barge into your life like this, but we need to talk. It's urgent. She left an address and said to be there Saturday at noon. I don't know what to do. My memories of that night have to be false. There was no police reports, no missing people. It had to have been in my head. Maybe Rachel can clear things up for me, give me the closure I need. Story 3. I spent my first winter break in college alone in the dorms. During my freshman year of college, I decided to stay behind in the dorms during winter break. Most people I ran into leading up to the vacation, predictably, casted doubt on my decision. Winter break was a time to escape college and be free from the stress of assignments and homework and deadlines. Why would you stay behind? Aren't you going to be lonely? Are your parents okay with you not coming home? I usually just dodge these questions. A ran into you walking to class conversation wasn't exactly a great medium for the heaviness of why I was staying. My life back in my hometown was unstable, to say the least. I was dealing with emotional abuse from my father that would become physical if he was angry enough. My mother's depression, a result of my dad's abuse, often instigated episodes that have traumatized me to this day. Starting in high school, I was called queer and fag by a lot of the other male students, who would spread rumors that I'd stare at them, presumably, lustfully. All in all, I was not happy at all while in my hometown, and very early on, I started fantasizing about college. The independence I would enjoy, the chance to be self-sustaining, becoming my own person. I couldn't help but imagine college as this place where I would be able to escape my home life indefinitely. I would start off with a clean slate. I could really be happy for once. That all came crashing down the very first week of my first year. I moved clear across the country for college, and I definitely underestimated how lonely I would be. I knew no one, and didn't feel comfortable reaching out to people to hang out, much less talk about my feelings. I was hospitalized for alcohol poisoning Thursday. It was the first week of college, and I had already been broken. I couldn't handle college not being the bastion or paradise that I had built it up to be. I was so sick of struggling, of trudging through life as if it were a quicksand that constantly threatened to pull me under, that I instinctively turned to numbing myself as a method of survival. That was how I had always survived back home, just pushing my feelings aside and continuing through the motions of the day, trying feebly to convince myself that this was how strong people dealt with these issues. But without the structure of my home life or even a general idea of what those motions would be, I turned to drinking, and I drank until I passed out on the bathroom floor and woke up in the hospital, clothes torn and reeking of vomit. I wish I could say that my hospitalization was a turning point, but in the weeks immediately following it, I just sank further and further into my depression. I passed my classes, but was not doing stellar work. Back home at my inner-city high school, I was a star student, able to ace exams and projects with minimal effort. I was built up by my teachers and principals so much that once I started attending an elite school, where everyone used to be the star student, I realized how far behind I actually was. Academically, I was crumbling. Money started becoming an issue, which stressed me out even more when it came to affording all my books. And in order to deal with it all, I would drink. Drinking became the only way I knew to push aside my sadness so that if I couldn't feel happy, I'd at least feel nothing. Once winter break had come around, I realized I had to stay in the dorms. Going home was not an option. There was no refuge for me there. As the days in December ticked by, I said goodbye to more and more friends as they hauled their luggage to the airport or train station. Slowly, but surely, I was alone. My campus had become a ghost town, save for the occasional custodian or security guard. I buckled down for the harsh month of solitude that was about to follow. At first I was able to fill my time with a bunch of activities. I started using the campus gym to work out. It was Oscars season, so I usually broke into one of the film classrooms and projected torrents onto my own personal big screen. My college ID got me free admission to a lot of museums. Usually by the time I got home, I'd be exhausted from the day and pass out immediately. However, no matter how tired I was, I always found the smallest bit of energy to pour myself some whiskey that I had stored in the bottom desk drawer. Going out during the day helped me forget about how alone I was, but there was no avoiding that fact once I had returned to my dorm single. The whiskey helped me accept that fact every single night. And for the most part it worked. Until Christmas Eve. Because it was Christmas Eve, everything was closed. There wasn't anything to really do, and going outside meant trudging through the heavy blizzard that was hammering the area with snow. I was basically confined to my room. I played some video games on my computer, watched a couple of episodes of TV on Netflix, and tried to MacGyver actual meals from the little that I had in my mini fridge. By the time mid-afternoon had hit, I was unbearably bored, and with that boredom came the crushing weight of my isolation. It hit me like a freight train. Having too much time to think meant getting trapped in my thoughts, and getting trapped in my thoughts meant battling my anxiety and my fragility once more. And like before, I quickly lost. I reached into my bottom desk drawer and pulled out my bottle of alcohol before pouring it into a used plastic cup that still felt sticky from the last time I had used it. I pressed the rim of the cup against my lips for a brief moment of absolute lucidity, where I knew what I was doing and why I was doing it. And yet, I still drank, and drank, and drank, and drank, and drank. I woke up on my bed to a knocking on my door. I didn't know how long I had been asleep. I couldn't even remember getting into my bed. I stared at my door, wondering who could possibly be knocking on my door when no one was on campus and no one was even coming back to campus until after the new year. The thought quickly left my mind as I rushed over to my garbage can and vomited. The first dry heaves made me feel a pain unlike any I had felt before. How did I get so sick? I don't even remember drinking more than I usually do, and usually when I would throw up, I felt better immediately after. Not this time. After I finished vomiting, I felt just as empty and nauseous as before. I was still really drunk. I hovered over the garbage, unsure if I was going to throw up again, when I heard another knock against my door. "Who is it?" I called out. I figured it was probably someone from housing, like the custodian, or someone sent by the custodian, who heard me in my room and wanted to check on me. My question received no response, so I asked once more, a little more forcefully, "Who is it?" No response again. I stared at the door. My vision started going dizzy. I did not want to move at all, afraid I would throw up again were I to move too quickly. I was blown back by another series of knocks exploded on my door. But it wasn't 2 or 3 knocks. The knocks continued for what felt like several minutes, hitting my door as if they were bullets against a brick wall. My heart began to pulse right against my chest, and I felt like it was going to burst as the sweat that had accumulated when I was vomiting began to pour more easily down my face now that I was in absolute fear. As suddenly as they began, the knocks stopped. I was abruptly aware of how loudly I was crying. Every breath I took felt like my lungs were too compressed to actually take it. My body, in its current state, was limited. My muscles were as viscous as gelatin as I used the bed frame to prop myself up. From this angle, I could see a shadow standing on the other side of my door against the bright light of the hallway. The shadow of a man's 2 legs extended under my door frame and into the first couple of feet of my dorm room. I called out to him once more, but this time more directly, as I slurred, "I can see your shadow, you know." I received a response immediately. "Good." I froze, like my body just gone into rigor mortis. The voice didn't sound like it had come from the doorway. It sounded like it had come from every single direction, as if the voice was the water of a lake I had jumped into. I looked all around me, at first thinking that I would see others in my room. But there was no one but me. I looked back at the door, the shadow unmoving, and in a moment of either bravery or stupidity, I rushed to the door, turned the door handle with a force I did not know I was capable of, and I swung the door open. There was no one there. I honestly almost thought to myself, "Of course there isn't," before I heard a door slam shut from further down the hall. I looked to the right just in time to see the handle of another door in the middle of the hall return to its default position. I don't know why I was acting with such gusto, but I grabbed my ID, which was also my door key, and I started my way towards the door. Maybe it was the fact that I was still drunk, but as I stumbled down the hall, clutching to the wall for support, I felt like the walk down this hall was taking much longer than it should have. I made it to the door, eventually, and I looked at the name sign that was on the front, Colby. Colby was an international student, so he definitely wouldn't come back a week and a half early because 35 hours of airplanes didn't make that a very convenient choice. There was no way he was back in his dorm. I still knocked on his door. "Colby! Open up, dude. What the fuck is wrong with you?" I got more and more frustrated, and my knocking turned into pounding on his door. "Colby! I know you're in there. Quit fucking with me, dude." I pounded, and kept pounding on the door, until, to my surprise, my fist failed to meet the cold wood. I opened my eyes, completely unaware of the fact that I closed them, and I looked at the door. All I saw, however, was the room inside. It was my room. This was impossible for 2 reasons. Firstly, all of the doors in our dorm lock automatically, and you need your ID to swipe back into your room, kind of like a hotel. I definitely did not swipe my ID to get into this room, so there was no reason for it to open on its own. Secondly, I looked back at the hallway, and saw my room further down, the second room from the last on the left before the hallway turned to the right. There was no doubt in my mind that the room I was looking into could not be my room. And yet, there it stood, completely identical to mine. The same posters. My computer sitting on the desk. My clothes strewn across the floor. What caught my eye most, however, was the person on my mattress. On the right side of the room was my bed, my twin XL with the same blue sheets, and under the covers, I could see the shape of a person, curled into the fetal position. I wanted to run away, to get back to the sanctuary of my own room just a couple of doors down, but then I heard whatever was under the covers crying. It sounded like me when I cried. My legs felt like they were reacting to the firing of synapses from a brain completely separate from mine, because I cannot fathom the reason why my brain would tell my legs to move towards the lump. I almost tripped over myself, my drunken state still handicapping my spatial reasoning, but within a matter of a few moments, I was right against the bed, where I could see the lump's movement as it cried from beneath the covers. My hands quivered as I reached to grab the covers and unveil what was underneath, but the covers came up to meet my hands. I looked at the rest of the body, which now seemed to be hovering above the bed. I tried to let myself doubt, but there was no denying once the body was floating at an altitude above me. The body unfurled from the fetal position until it was parallel to the bed, like it was lying in a coffin. And then came the scream. The body let out the most blood-curdling scream I had ever heard, as if it was fighting through excruciating pain. I covered my ears, and that was when I realized that the scream was not only coming from the body, but also from all around me, just as the man's voice had done before. And just like when the man knocked on my door, the screams ceased as abruptly as they began. I started crying. I tasted salt on my upper lips, either from the tears that were falling profusely or from the sweat on my forehead that had built up from fear. I expected the body to fall back into the bed, but the exact opposite happened. The bed rose from the ground like an arrow from a bow and slammed the body against the ceiling. The desk and dresser behind me did the same, and the clothes that were on the floor immediately followed suit. It was as if someone had flipped the entire room so rapidly that its contents had no time to shift to the left or the right. Everything fell directly into position onto the ceiling, yet I stayed firmly planted on the ground. And I wasn't going to wait until I was stuck on the ceiling. I ran out of the room as fast as I could, and the door slammed behind me. The speed at which I had turned my body to leave the room pushed my drunken nausea over the edge, and I ended up vomiting on the carpeted floor right outside of what should have been Colby's room. My stomach had never felt so empty. I was running on fumes. As I looked to the right of the hall, I could see my room, my refuge, the second door from the last on the left side before the hallway turned to the right. I looked to the left. Even more rooms in that direction. Suddenly, the lights at the very end of the hall shut off. I anticipated what happened next. The next set of lights shut off. And then the next. Soon, the darkness began its journey to envelop me. I forced myself to my feet, and with what little energy and lucidity I had, I tried to run over to my room. The lights shut off faster and faster, until the darkness was basically sprinting towards me. I reached my door and fumbled through my pockets, searching for my ID. I couldn't find it. Had I left it in Colby's room? Had I dropped it? The lights shut off even faster. Soon, the entire hall would be dark, and I would be vulnerable. I kept fumbling through my pockets, trying to come up with a plan of action. Fuck. I must have dropped my ID. I'm going to have to figure out how to get back to Colby's. No. I found my ID in my back pocket. I quickly swiped it and threw door open before diving into my room. The door shut slowly behind me, but not before I looked across the threshold as the hallway light directly outside of my room shut off. And that's when I saw him. Somehow, the darkness of his shape stood out against the general darkness of the hall he stood in. I couldn't truly comprehend his body shape in the split second between the hall light shutting off and the door closing, but what stood out to me the most were his eyes. The eyeballs themselves were even darker than his form, with silver veins jutting towards the irises. His irises were the most piercing white I had ever seen. His eyes betrayed the human form that composed what I saw of his body. In that stare, that short stare, I could feel the eons of evil that composed him, that gave him purpose. Though the door had closed within a split second, I thought we had stared at each other for an eternity. I was in such a state of shock that it took me a couple of seconds to realize that the light in my room was off. I knew immediately that I did not want to be in the dark any longer, so I got up and turned on my light. Hoping to have some access to the outside world, I opened my blinds to let in the lights of the city, but all that I could see outside my window was my room. Not a reflection, it was as if, had I opened the window and crawled through, I would still be standing in my room. I stared directly at my reflection before it turned around and walked over to the desk. I watched it as it sat down, poured itself a drink, and shot it down. The door behind my reflection burst open, and before it could defend itself, a white, skeletal hand reached out from the darkness that was pouring in from the hallway like smoke. I saw the same eyes I had just seen outside of my door open up on the other side of the window. The darkness soon covered the white skeletal hand that held onto other me before he was thrown against the ceiling, stuck there as if gravity had reversed. Tears streamed down his face and the darkness rose towards the ceiling. That's when the bones started cracking. Other me's legs were bent into inhuman shapes, his arms torn from his side like they were weeds from the garden. Blood cascaded from the fresh wounds, staining the walls and causing the posters to crumple up and fall from the wall. I saw him open his mouth to let out a guttural scream, muted only by the glass that separated us. I stood there, watching as his hair was pulled from his head, pulling the scalp along with it and leaving behind an exposed brain. Slashes cut through his shirt and pants, leaving slits in his skin where more blood fell like a waterfall onto the floor. Finally, maybe sensing how much I wanted the horror show to end, the skeletal hand grabbed hold of his neck, and with a quick swipe of its nail, I saw his head, my head, fall to the floor, rolling a bit before settling into a position where it stared directly at me. The body fell to the floor and crumbled before my eyes. I closed the blinds, finally shielding me from the room on the other side of my window. I turned around to face my door. I saw light coming from beneath it, but no shadow extended into my room. This was it. This was my chance. Wearing no shoes, and the shorts that I slept in, I ran to the door, out of my room, to the elevator bank, and called an elevator. An elevator came immediately. I got on and pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator made its descent, but when its doors had opened, I was still on my floor. I tried again, pressing the button and riding the elevator to the bottom, but again, the doors opened to my floor. I looked to my right, down the hallway towards my room, and saw the lights were shutting off just as they had before. It knew. It knew I had left my room, and it was coming for me. I went into total flight mode, and ran to the left. Here, the hallway turned to the right where there were more rooms, but there was also a staircase. As I ran down the hall, I sensed the lights shutting off behind me, motivating me even more to make it to the staircase door. Within seconds I was practically flying down the stairs, determined to not let whatever was in the darkness catch up to me. I lived on the 8th floor, so I counted the flights of stairs as I descended. After 5 flights, I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest from adrenaline. After 6 flights, I started crying, hopeful that I would be protected in the outside world. After 7 flights, I knew something was wrong. There was no door leading out of the stairwell. I climbed back up 1 flight to use that exit door, but it was gone as well. I descended another 2 flights to the basement, only to see the same thing. All of the doors were gone. I was trapped. I couldn't believe it. Finally, I had gone into a state of shock, completely unable to comprehend what was going on. I sat on the stairs, and just started crying into my hands. I couldn't believe it. After all this, another obstacle, another setback. Something else in my way. Another struggle. My anxiety crept up to me again, and for a split second, I craved the alcohol that would keep my uneasiness at bay. That's when I noticed the lights going out from above me. One by one, the lights that illuminated each flight of stairs went out, slowly at first, but just as before, the darkness began sprinting down the stairs. I refused to take my eyes off of it. I was ready. I was willing to accept my fate. I was ready to die. The lights stopped going out about 2 stories above me. I took in the moment of silence and peace that punctuated my fear of my impending death before the skeletal hand extended from beyond the darkness, resting on the railing above, clutching the bloodied head it took from the body of my reflection. A loud bang came from in front of me. I looked and a door had reappeared. I launched myself towards it just as the darkness let out a deep, low roar louder than horn of a fire engine. I ran into the ground floor lobby of my building, but I did not stop. I ran past the empty vending machines, past the RA board, and past the desk where the security officer who swiped people and sat. He called out to me, "Hey, Come back. You can't go outside dressed like that." I sprinted out of the building and into what I expected to be a blizzard. But there was no blizzard. The streets were completely clear. I eventually made it to the quad, where stone stairs separated North Campus from the main library that was just across the way. I started walking down those stairs, suddenly slowing down. Each step felt even heavier, as if weights had been attached to my ankles. I don't know if it was from the stress of what had just happened or because of the fact that I was finally starting to sober up, but each step took too much force and energy to complete, and I crumbled onto the last stair. I was going in and out of consciousness. I heard the bells from the university chapel ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was 7 a.m. Where had the time gone, I wondered, before I finally closed my eyes. I was awoken by the sunlight. The harsh light made it difficult to open my eyes fully, but I managed. I pulled myself up. I looked toward the chapel, the clock on it reading 8:11 a.m. A snowflake fell gently onto my cheek. It was Christmas. I couldn't stay out in the snow with how I was dressed, and I felt like I was on the verge of hypothermia. I made the walk back to my dorm, scared of the danger I was placing myself in, but in the pit of my stomach, almost like intuition, I felt that I would be safe now. I swiped myself in and avoided eye contact with the guard. I called an elevator, which immediately took me to the 8th floor. Everything looked normal. I turned to the right, for the man to be there, outside of my door, or for the hallway lights to go out again. But neither happened. I swiped my ID on my door and entered my room, which looked exactly how I had left it. The first thing I did was grab the whiskey in my bottom desk drawer. I took it into the bathroom, where I poured the rest of its contents down the drain before taking a warm shower. I spent the rest of the day as if nothing had happened. I slept a little more, ate breakfast, went to the gym, watched some TV in the common area before heading to a Christmas market that was happening downtown. I dreaded having to go back to my room, scared that the man in the shadows would show up and terrorize me once more. But he didn't. He never came back. He didn't come back that night, or the following night, or the following week, or the following month. I have not seen him since Christmas Eve of my freshman year. And I've been sober ever since. Things started getting better for me the following semester. I switched majors and started doing really well academically, and I even made Dean's List. I started writing stuff for campus plays, and even acted in a couple. I made a new group of friends, and I finally started to feel like I had a community in college. I am writing this after just graduating from college this past June. I'm about to start my first job next week, and I'm all moved into my very first apartment. On occasion, I find myself having a hard time resisting a drink, especially when I'm out on the town or at dinner with friends. But every time that craving emerges, I swear that I can see him, out of the corner of my eye, waiting for me to give in, waiting for me to make myself weak. And each time, I remember that night. I remember him. I remember surviving. And I remember that, even without alcohol, I'm going to be alright.